James Wilson sat alone in the corner booth of Mel's Diner. It was Sunday morning, his favorite time of the week. The smell of fresh coffee and pancakes filled the air. At 45 years old, James was a big man. His once strong body had gotten softer since he left the Marines 15 years ago. But under his gentle smile and extra weight was still the heart of a trained soldier. The small town of Riverdale had been his home for only 3 years. He moved here looking for peace after his long military career. In the Marines, James had been part of Force Recon, an elite unit that handled the toughest missions. He had seen war in many countries and trained young soldiers to be brave and disciplined. But those days were behind him now. "More coffee, James?" asked Linda, the kind waitress who always took care of him. "Yes, please," James said with a smile. Linda was one of the few people in town who made an effort to know him. Most people in Riverdale kept to themselves, and that was fine with James. He wasn't looking for attention. James cut into his stack of pancakes and looked around the diner. There were a few other customers enjoying their breakfast. An old couple by the window. A mother with her young daughter in a booth across the room. The owner, Mr. Mel himself, behind the counter counting money. It was a normal, quiet Sunday. The bell above the diner door jingled. 5 young men walked in. They wore matching jackets with symbols that James recognized right away. He had seen those symbols before, on reports about a local hate group. The diner suddenly got very quiet. The other customers looked down at their food. Linda stopped wiping the counter and tensed up. James kept eating his pancakes, but he watched the men from the corner of his eye. This was a skill he learned in the Marines. Always be aware of your surroundings. The 5 men scanned the diner, and then their eyes landed on James. The tallest one, who seemed to be their leader, nudged his friends and smiled in a mean way. They started walking toward James's booth. He noticed how they moved, confident, looking for trouble. The youngest one kept glancing at the door, maybe thinking about what might happen. The stocky one on the right had his hand in his pocket, possibly holding a weapon. James had faced far more dangerous men in war zones across the world. The gang surrounded his booth like wolves circling their prey. James remained calm. He took another bite of his pancakes and wiped his mouth with a napkin. Years of military training had taught him to stay cool under pressure. "Look what we have here, boys," the leader said loudly so everyone in the diner could hear. "Seems like someone doesn't know this part of town isn't for his kind." The others laughed, but their eyes were cold. James could feel the hate coming from them. He had seen this kind of hatred before, both in war and in peace. It always came from fear and ignorance. James looked up at them. He could feel the other customers watching. He could see Linda wanting to help but being held back by Mr. Mel, who shook his head at her. Nobody wanted trouble in their quiet town. Nobody wanted to get involved. "I'm just trying to enjoy my breakfast," James said quietly. "There's plenty of room in this diner for everyone." He looked directly into the leader's eyes, not challenging, but not showing fear either. This seemed to make the leader angry. He wasn't used to being spoken to this way, especially by someone he had already decided was beneath him. "You hear that, boys? He thinks there's room for everyone." The leader leaned down, putting his hands on James's table. James knew what was coming next. He had been in enough situations like this to see trouble before it started. The calm morning at Mel's Diner was about to change, and these 5 young men had no idea who they were messing with. The leader of the gang knocked over James's coffee cup. The hot liquid spilled across the table and onto James's lap. "Oops," the gang leader said with fake concern in his voice. "Looks like you had an accident, big man." James slowly wiped the coffee from his pants with a napkin. His movements were calm and controlled. He thought about all the young Marines he had trained over the years. He had always taught them that true strength came from discipline, not from bullying others. Linda, the waitress, started to walk toward them, worry on her face, but Mr. Mel, the owner, caught her arm and shook his head. The other customers watched in uncomfortable silence. No one wanted to get involved. James understood. People were afraid, and fear often made people do nothing. "You boys should leave," James said. His voice was still calm, but now it had an edge to it. This new tone made two of the gang members look at each other nervously. "You're disturbing everyone's meal." The leader stood up straight, clearly not used to being told what to do. His face turned red with anger. "And who's going to make us leave? You?" He poked James hard in the chest. "The fat man who can barely fit in the booth." The others laughed because they had to, but their laughter sounded forced. They were starting to sense that something wasn't right about the man they had chosen to pick on. James sighed and placed his napkin neatly on the table. He had come to Riverdale to find peace, to leave violence behind. But some people only understood one language. "Last chance," he said quietly. "Walk away now." The leader grabbed James by the collar of his shirt. "Or what?" Before he could finish his sentence, James moved. Despite his size, he was surprisingly fast. In one smooth motion, he broke the leader's grip, stood up, and twisted the young man's arm behind his back. He pushed the leader face down onto the table. The movement was precise and controlled, showing years of combat training. The other gang members stood frozen in shock as their leader groaned in pain. James looked at them calmly. "Your friend here made a mistake. Don't make another one." His voice was steady. His breathing was normal. Taking down the gang leader had been as easy for him as tying his shoes. The stocky gang member reached into his pocket, but James gave him a look that made him stop. "Marine Force Recon, 15 years, James said quietly. "I've faced real killers in war, not boys playing tough in matching jackets." He pressed a little harder on the leader's arm, making him yelp in pain. "Now you're all going to leave this diner, and you're going to think hard about the path you're on." One by one, the gang members backed away. Their tough act from before was gone now that they faced real skill and courage. James let go of the leader, who quickly got to his feet. His face was red with shame. "This isn't over," he muttered, but there was fear in his eyes now. "Yes, it is," James replied firmly. "Because next time, I won't be so gentle. And I'll be calling the police to report what you did here today." He took out his phone, and the gang hurried out of the diner. The bell jingled as they left. The diner was silent for a moment. Then everyone started clapping. Linda rushed over with a fresh cup of coffee and a towel. "This one's free, James," she said with a grateful smile. "I should have done something sooner." James shook his head. "You did the right thing, staying safe." He looked around at the other customers, who now looked at him with respect and thanks. The old couple by the window nodded to him. The mother with her child gave him a tearful smile. Mr. Mel walked over from behind the counter. He looked ashamed. "I'm sorry I didn't help," he said. "Those boys have been causing trouble all over town for months. Nobody stands up to them." "Sometimes it takes someone who's seen real trouble to know how to handle it," James said. He didn't want to make Mr. Mel feel worse, and sometimes doing nothing is the safest choice. James went back to eating his breakfast, but he could feel that something had changed. The people in the diner no longer saw him as just the quiet big man who came in on Sundays. Now they saw him as something else. A protector. Someone who wasn't afraid. As he ate, James wondered if word would spread about what happened. He hadn't come to Riverdale looking for attention or to be a hero, but sometimes life had other plans. By the time James left Mel's diner that afternoon, 3 people had already called their friends about what happened. The story of how a big, quiet man had stood up to the town's most feared gang spread quickly through Riverdale. James walked home to his small house on Oak Street. It was a modest place with a front porch where he liked to sit in the evenings. As he turned onto his street, Mrs. Jenkins from next door waved to him with more energy than usual. "Afternoon, James," she called. "Heard you had quite a morning at Mel's." James smiled but shook his head. News traveled fast in small towns. "Just a small problem that got solved," he said. "Well, my nephew works at the gas station, and he said those boys came in there crying about a big man who nearly broke their arms." Mrs. Jenkins laughed. About time someone taught them a lesson. James just nodded and continued to his house. He didn't want praise for what he did. In his mind, he had simply done what was right, what anyone should do when faced with such clear wrong. Inside his home, James sat in his favorite chair and picked up the book he had been reading. But before he could open it, his phone rang. It was a number he didn't know. "Hello," he answered. "Is this James Wilson?" asked a deep voice. "Yes, it is. This is Sheriff Tom Parker. Hope you don't mind me calling. Linda from the diner gave me your number." James sat up straighter. "Is there a problem, Sheriff?" "No problem at all," Sheriff Parker said. "Just wanted to thank you for what you did today. Those Johnson boys and their friends have been causing trouble in our town for too long. Nobody's been able to stand up to them." "I didn't hurt them," James said quickly. "Just showed them there are consequences for their actions." "And that's exactly what they needed," the sheriff replied. "Listen, I'd like to come by and talk to you, if that's all right. Not about any trouble. I just think you might be able to help our town in other ways." James wasn't sure what the sheriff meant, but he agreed to meet him the next day. After hanging up, he sat thinking about how different this was from what he had planned. He came to Riverdale to live a quiet life, away from conflict. Now he was getting calls from the sheriff and neighbors were talking about him. Just before dinner, there was a knock at his door. When James opened it, he found Mr. Mell standing there, holding a large paper bag. "Brought you dinner," Mr. Mell said, looking a bit uncomfortable. "Best steak in town. On the house, of course." James started to refuse, but he could see this was important to Mr. Mell. "Come in," he said instead. Mr. Mell placed the bag on James's kitchen table. "I should have done more today," he said. "I was scared of those boys. They smashed my windows last month when I asked them to stop bothering my customers." "Fear is a normal feeling," James said. "In the Marines, we learn to act even when we're afraid. It's not about not feeling fear. It's about what you do with it." Mr. Mell looked at James with new respect. "The whole town's talking about you, you know. People are saying maybe now things will change." After Mr. Mell left, James sat on his porch watching the sunset. This morning, he had been just another face in town. Now people were looking at him as some kind of hero. It made him uncomfortable. He hadn't fought the gang to be a hero. He had done it because it was right. As darkness fell, James saw a car drive slowly past his house. It was an old blue Chevy that he recognized from the diner parking lot. One of the gang members was behind the wheel. The car drove past, then turned around and came back, going even slower. James stayed where he was, calm and still. If they were trying to scare him, they were wasting their time. He had faced real danger in war. These boys didn't know what real danger was. The car finally drove away, but James knew this wasn't over. The gang had been embarrassed, and people like that didn't just walk away. They would be back, and when they came, James would be ready. The next morning, Sheriff Tom Parker pulled up in front of James's house in his police car. He was a tall man with gray hair and deep lines on his face that spoke of years of worry. James invited him in and offered him coffee. "Black, no sugar," the sheriff said as he took a seat at James's kitchen table. He looked around the simple, clean house. "Nice place you got here." "Thanks," James replied. "It's all I need." The sheriff took a sip of his coffee. "So 15 years in the Marines, huh? Force Recon. That's impressive." James shrugged. "Just did my job. And now you work at the hardware store on Main Street. 3 days a week. Helps pay the bills and keeps me busy." James sat across from the sheriff. "But I don't think you came here to talk about my job." Sheriff Parker nodded. "Straight to the point. I like that." He put down his coffee cup. "Here's the thing, James. Riverdale used to be a peaceful town. Good people, neighbors helping neighbors. But in the last few years, things have changed. Those boys you met yesterday, they're part of a bigger problem." "The hate group," James said. "Yes, they started as just a few angry young men, but they've grown. Now they bully people, vandalize property, and spread their poison. And I don't have enough deputies to stop them." The sheriff looked tired. "We're a small town with a small police force." "I understand," James said, "but I'm not sure how I can help." Sheriff Parker leaned forward. "The youth center on Pine Street is struggling. It used to be a place where kids could go after school, learn skills, stay out of trouble. Now it's almost empty because people are afraid to go there. The gang has made it their territory." James listened carefully. He was starting to see where this was going. "We need someone to take back the youth center," the sheriff continued. "Someone who can teach these kids there's a better way than hate. Someone they can look up to." He looked directly at James. "Someone like you." James was quiet for a moment. "I'm not a teacher, Sheriff. But you were a leader in the Marines, weren't you? You trained young men and women, taught them discipline, respect." The sheriff stood up and walked to the window. "Look, I'm not asking you to fight anyone. I'm asking you to give our town's youth an alternative to joining these gangs." James thought about it. He had come to Riverdale for a quiet life. But maybe there was a reason he had ended up here, in this town, at this time. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" James finally asked. "Run some programs at the youth center. Maybe teach self-defense, but also discipline and respect. The kind of things the Marines taught you." The sheriff turned back to face James. "The town council can pay you. Not much, but something." "I don't need money," James said, "but I'll think about it." After the sheriff left, James sat on his porch swing, thinking. The quiet life he had planned seemed to be slipping away. But in its place was something else. A purpose, a way to help. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of breaking glass. He jumped up to see 3 boys running away from Mrs. Jenkins's house across the street. Her front window was shattered. James ran over. Mrs. Jenkins stood in her doorway, looking scared. "Are you okay?" James asked. She nodded, but her hands were shaking. "They threw a rock through my window. There was a note tied to it." She handed James a crumpled piece of paper. The note was simple. "This is what happens to people who talk to heroes." James felt anger rise in him. Mrs. Jenkins was being targeted because of him, because of what she had said yesterday. "I'm calling the sheriff," he said. "It won't help," Mrs. Jenkins replied. "By the time he gets here, those boys will be long gone, and they'll just deny it anyway." James knew she was right. In that moment, he made his decision. If the gang wanted to target innocent people because of him, then he would give them someone else to focus on. He would take the sheriff up on his offer. He would go to the youth center and give the young people of Riverdale another option besides hate and fear. "Don't worry," he told Mrs. Jenkins. "I'll help you fix this window. And I promise you, things are going to change in this town." The youth center on Pine Street was a large brick building with faded paint and a basketball court that needed new nets. When James walked up the steps the following Monday, he noticed graffiti on the walls. Some of it was gang symbols. Some of it was words of hate. He made a mental note to get paint to cover it up. Inside, the center was almost empty. A few old tables and chairs sat in the main room. Posters hung crooked on the walls. A middle-aged woman sat at a desk near the entrance, looking surprised to see someone walk in. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I'm James Wilson," he said. "Sheriff Parker might have called about me." Her face lit up. "Yes. I'm Susan, the center director." She stood and shook his hand warmly. "I was beginning to think you wouldn't come." "Why is that?" James asked. Susan looked uncomfortable. "Well, after what those boys did to Mrs. Jenkins, and then the fire at Mr. Mel's garbage cans last night, people are saying it's because of what happened at the diner." James hadn't heard about the fire. It seemed the gang was busy causing trouble for anyone who supported him. This made him even more determined to help. "I'm here now," he said simply. "Where do we start?" Susan showed him around the center. There was a small gym, a computer room with 3 old computers, and a kitchen. We used to serve meals to kids who needed them, she explained. But now barely anyone comes. When was the last time you had a good number of kids here? James asked. About 6 months ago, before the gang started hanging around outside, scaring everyone away. She pointed to a calendar on the wall. We used to have programs every day. Sports, tutoring, cooking classes. James looked at the empty rooms and saw what they could be. With the right guidance, this place could be full of young people learning and growing. Let's put up some flyers, he said. Let people know the center is open for business again. They spent the day making simple flyers. James wrote down what he could offer: self-defense classes, fitness training, homework help, and a safe place to hang out. He was no teacher, but he had skills to share. As they worked, a few curious kids peeked in the door. Susan greeted them warmly and introduced James. He smiled and shook their hands firmly, the way he would greet a new Marine recruit. "What are you doing here?" one boy asked. He looked about 13, skinny with bright eyes. "I'm going to be running some programs," James replied. "Self-defense, fitness. You interested?" The boy shrugged, trying to look cool. "Maybe. What makes you think you can teach us anything?" James smiled. 15 years in the Marine Corps Force Recon taught me a few things, but you'll have to show up to find out what they are. This caught the boy's attention. "For real? You were a Marine?" "Still am," James said. "Once a Marine, always a Marine." The boy nodded, impressed despite himself. "I'm Marcus. My friends and I might check it out." "First class is tomorrow at 4, James told him. "Spread the word." As Marcus left, Susan looked hopeful for the first time. "That's Marcus Thompson. Good kid, but he's been hanging around the edge of the gang. If you can get him to come, others will follow." By the end of the day, they had put up flyers all over town. James walked home feeling good about what he had started. But as he turned onto Oak Street, he saw the blue Chevy again, parked across from his house. The gang was watching him. James didn't change his pace. He walked straight to his front door, unlocked it, and went inside without giving the car a glance. He wasn't afraid of them, but he was concerned about what they might do to stop his work at the youth center before it even began. At 3:30 the next day, James arrived at the youth center early to prepare for his first class. He moved the tables in the main room to create an open space. He had brought some basic equipment from home: hand wraps, focus pads, and a timer. Susan helped him set up, looking both excited and nervous. "Do you think anyone will show up?" she asked. "We'll see," James replied. He knew from his military days that you couldn't force people to follow you. You had to earn their trust and respect. At 10 minutes to 4, the front door opened. It was Marcus, the boy from yesterday. He had 3 friends with him. They tried to look tough, but James could see they were curious. "You really teaching fighting?" one of the boys asked. "No," James said firmly. "I'm teaching self-defense, discipline, and respect. Fighting is what people do when they don't have those things." The boys looked at each other, not sure what to make of this, but they stayed. By 4 o'clock, 9 young people had arrived. 6 boys and 3 girls, ranging from about 12 to 16 years old. James was pleased. It was a start. "Line up," he said in his Marine training voice. The kids jumped a little, but they got in line. James walked in front of them, just as he had done with new Marine recruits. "My name is James Wilson. I was a Marine for 15 years. I'm not here to teach you how to hurt people. I'm here to teach you how to protect yourselves and others." He looked each of them in the eye. "First rule, respect everyone in this room. Second rule, what I teach you is for defense only. If I hear about anyone using these skills to bully others, you're out. Understood?" The kids nodded, some more seriously than others. "Good. Now let's start with proper stance." For the next hour, James taught them basic footwork and how to stand to keep their balance. It wasn't exciting, but it was the foundation of everything else. To his surprise, the kids stayed focused. Even Marcus, who had seemed ready to cause trouble, paid attention. After the class, as the kids were getting ready to leave, Marcus hung back. "That was different than I thought it would be," he said. "What were you expecting?" James asked. "I dunno. More like the movies, I guess. Punching and kicking." James smiled. "That comes later, after you learn the basics. It's like building a house. You need a strong foundation first." Marcus nodded. "My uncle says you took down Joey Johnson and his crew at the diner. That true?" James was careful with his answer. "I stopped some trouble. That's all." "Joey's brother Mike is the leader of the Black Skulls," Marcus said, looking at his shoes. "That's the gang around here. They're saying they're gonna get back at you." "I appreciate the warning," James said, "but I'm not worried about them. I'm more interested in making sure this center is a safe place for you and your friends." Marcus looked up at him. "My dad left when I was 8. Never taught me nothing." James understood what the boy wasn't saying. "Well, I'm here now. And I've got plenty to teach anyone who wants to learn." After Marcus left, Susan came over, smiling widely. 9 kids. That's more than we've had in months. And they actually paid attention to you." "It's a start," James agreed. "But we need to do more. These kids need more than just self-defense classes." Over the next few days, more young people started coming to the center. Word was spreading that a real Marine was teaching there. James added more programs. Fitness training in the mornings, homework help in the afternoons, and even some basic cooking lessons using the center's kitchen. But as the center grew busier, so did the gang's attention. Twice that week, James found new graffiti on the building. Once, someone had slashed the tires on Susan's car. The gang was sending a message. The sheriff drove by more often, but he couldn't be there all the time. James knew a confrontation was coming. He just didn't know when or how bad it would be. On Friday afternoon, as James was locking up the center, he saw the blue Chevy parked across the street. This time, all 5 gang members from the diner were inside, watching him. The message was clear. They hadn't forgotten, and they weren't going to let this go. Saturday night, James was walking home from the grocery store. The streets of Riverdale were quiet. Most stores closed early on weekends, and the sidewalks were empty. James carried a bag of groceries in one arm, thinking about his plans for the youth center next week. He had just turned onto Oak Street when he heard a car engine behind him. The blue Chevy pulled up, and 5 men got out. It was dark, but James recognized them from the diner. Joey Johnson, the one he had pinned to the table, stood in front of the others. "Remember us?" Joey asked. His voice was tight with anger. He held something in his hand. In the dim light, James could see it was a baseball bat. James set his grocery bag down carefully on the sidewalk. "I remember you," he said calmly. "I also remember telling you to think about the path you're on." "We've been thinking, all right," Joey said. "Thinking about how you embarrassed us. Thinking about how you're turning those kids against us. Thinking about how you need to be taught a lesson." The others spread out in a half circle. 2 of them also had bats. One had what looked like a chain. They were more prepared this time. James stayed calm. He had been in worse situations in war. 5 against 1 with weapons, he said. "Is that how brave you are?" Joey's face twisted with anger. "You think you're so tough. Let's see how tough you are now." James knew he needed to end this quickly. If he let it turn into a drawn-out fight, someone could get seriously hurt. These weren't trained fighters. They were angry young men who didn't know how dangerous this situation could become. "Last chance to walk away," James said. "Next time the sheriff visits you, it won't be just about harassment." "Shut up," Joey yelled, and swung the bat at James's head. James moved fast. He stepped inside the swing, blocked Joey's arm, and used his own momentum to throw him to the ground. The bat clattered on the pavement. Before the others could react, James had picked it up. The man with the chain came at him next. James blocked the chain with the bat, then stepped forward and pushed the man back hard. He fell over Joey, who was still on the ground. The other three rushed him all at once. James moved with the skill and speed of his military training. He didn't try to hurt them. He just made sure they couldn't hurt him. One swing missed, and James used the man's forward motion to push him into his friend. Both went down in a tangle of limbs. The last one, the stocky man from the diner, stopped and pulled out a knife. "You're dead," he growled. James held the bat ready. "That's a line you don't want to cross," he said seriously. "Put it down now, and this doesn't have to get worse." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then lights came on in nearby houses. A door opened down the street. The sound of a police siren could be heard in the distance. The stocky man looked at his friends on the ground, then back at James. Slowly, he lowered the knife. "This isn't over," he said. "Yes, it is," came a voice from behind them. Sheriff Parker stood there with his gun drawn. Behind him were two deputies, and to James's surprise, Marcus and several other kids from the youth center. "Marcus called me," the sheriff explained, coming closer. "Said he heard the gang talking about jumping you tonight." He looked at the gang members with disgust. "Drop the weapons. All of you are under arrest for assault." As the deputies handcuffed the gang members, Marcus approached James. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm fine," James said. "How did you know they were coming after me?" "I heard my cousin talking. He hangs with them sometimes." Marcus looked ashamed. "I almost didn't call the sheriff. The Black Skulls. They hurt people who snitch." James put his hand on the boy's shoulder. "What you did took real courage. That's more important than any self-defense move I could teach you." After giving his statement to the sheriff, James picked up his groceries, now spilled across the sidewalk. Marcus and the other kids helped him. "You didn't even look scared," one of the younger boys said with admiration. "Being brave isn't about not feeling fear," James told him. "It's about doing what's right even when you are afraid." James knew the gang's arrest wouldn't solve all of Riverdale's problems. The hate and anger that drove young men to join such groups wouldn't disappear overnight. But as he walked home with the kids from the youth center beside him, he felt like it was a start. The arrest of Joey Johnson and his gang made the front page of the Riverdale Weekly News. The story described how a former Marine had defended himself against 5 armed attackers and how a brave young man had called the sheriff. James didn't like the attention, but he was proud of Marcus. In the weeks that followed, the youth center changed. The walls were repainted, covering up the hate symbols. New basketball nets were installed. The computer room got 2 more computers, donated by local businesses. Most importantly, more kids started coming. James expanded his programs. Monday and Wednesday were self-defense classes. Tuesday was fitness training. Thursday was homework help. Friday was game night, where kids could just have fun in a safe place. One Thursday afternoon, James was helping a girl named Tanya with her math homework when Marcus burst in, looking upset. "What's wrong?" James asked. "Mike Johnson got out of jail yesterday," Marcus said. Mike was Joey's older brother and the leader of the Black Skulls. "My cousin says he's really mad about what happened to Joey. Says he's going to get revenge." James stayed calm. "Did your cousin say what Mike was planning?" "No, but he's worse than Joey. He's been to prison before." Marcus looked scared. "What if he comes after you? Or me for calling the sheriff?" James put his hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Listen to me. Fear is how people like Mike control others. He wants you to be scared, but remember what I taught you about courage. Doing what's right even when you're afraid," Marcus repeated. "Exactly. And you're not alone. You have me, Sheriff Parker, and everyone else at the center." That Saturday, James organized a community cleanup day. Kids from the center and their parents gathered to pick up trash in the park, plant flowers, and repair the playground equipment. Even Mr. Mel from the diner came to help, bringing sandwiches for everyone. As they worked, James noticed how different things felt. People were talking and laughing. Kids who once stayed inside out of fear were playing together. Parents who had never met were becoming friends. Sheriff Parker stopped by to check on them. "Quite a change," he said, looking around at the busy park. "It's a start," James replied. "The Johnson brothers and their gang aren't going away completely," the sheriff warned. "Mike's out now, and Joey will be released next month. Their hate runs deep." "I know," James said, "but hate can't survive when the community stands together." Later that day, as the cleanup was ending, a black truck drove slowly past the park. James recognized Mike Johnson behind the wheel. Mike stared at him with cold, hate-filled eyes, then drove away. That night, James sat on his porch, thinking about how much had changed in just a few weeks. He had come to Riverdale looking for a quiet life. Instead, he had found a purpose and a community that needed him. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of breaking glass and shouts from down the street. James ran toward the noise and found the youth center with its windows smashed. The front door had been broken open. Inside, spray paint covered the newly painted walls. The computers were smashed. Even the cooking equipment in the kitchen had been destroyed. In the middle of the main room, someone had burned a hate symbol into the floor. Susan arrived, tears in her eyes. "Why would anyone do this?" she asked. James knew exactly who had done it. This was Mike Johnson's revenge. But destroying things wouldn't stop what James had started. "We'll rebuild," he said firmly. "Better than before." Word of the vandalism spread quickly through town. By Sunday morning, people began gathering at the center. They brought cleaning supplies, paint, tools, and determination. Parents, kids, teachers, and business owners all came to help. Mr. Mell brought his son who was good with computers. Mrs. Jenkins brought curtains she had made at home. Marcus and his friends were the first to start cleaning up the hate symbols. As James watched everyone working together, he realized something important. The gang had tried to spread fear and hate, but they had actually created something else: unity. The people of Riverdale were taking back their town, one small act of courage at a time. 3 months had passed since James first stood up to the gang at Mel's Diner. The youth center was now a busy, thriving place. Over 40 kids came regularly for programs. Parents volunteered their time. The community had truly made it their own. James still taught self-defense classes, but now he had help. 2 of his older students had become assistant teachers. Marcus, especially, had shown natural leadership skills. He was good at explaining things to the younger kids and always made sure everyone felt included. One Sunday morning, James went to Mel's Diner for breakfast, just as he had done that first day. He sat in the same corner booth. Linda brought him coffee with a warm smile. "The usual, James?" she asked. "Yes, please," he replied. As he waited for his food, James noticed how different the diner felt. People were relaxed, talking and laughing. No one looked over their shoulder in fear. Mr. Mell walked between tables, chatting with customers. The bell above the door jingled. James looked up and saw Joey Johnson walk in. He had been released from jail last week. He was alone, not with his gang, and he looked thinner and older than before. The diner went quiet. Everyone watched as Joey stood at the entrance, his eyes finding James in the corner booth. For a moment, no one moved. Then Joey walked slowly toward James's table. James stayed calm, watching Joey approach. He wasn't looking for another fight, but he was ready if one came. Joey stopped at the edge of the table. "Can I sit?" he asked, his voice quiet. James was surprised, but he nodded. Joey slid into the booth across from him. "Coffee?" Linda asked, coming over with the pot. Her hand shook slightly. "Yes, Mom." "Thank you," Joey said. His polite tone surprised everyone. After Linda left, Joey stared into his coffee cup. "I heard what you've been doing at the youth center," he finally said. James waited, letting him speak. "My little sister started going there last month. Says you're teaching her self-defense." Joey looked up at James. "She says you're good to the kids. Treat them with respect." "That's right," James said. Joey nodded slowly. "I've had a lot of time to think in jail. About what I've done. About the people I've hurt." He looked around the diner, at the people who were still watching him nervously. "I grew up angry. My dad beat us. Kids at school made fun of me. I found the gang, and suddenly I had power. Made me feel good to scare people." James listened. He had seen this before in the military. Young men with pain who turned it into anger because they didn't know what else to do with it. "I'm not in the Black Skulls anymore," Joey continued. "Told my brother I was done after I got out. He says I'm dead to him now." Joey's hands tightened around his coffee cup. "I don't know what to do next." James thought carefully before speaking. "The youth center needs help fixing the roof," he said. "Could use someone who knows construction." Joey looked up, surprised. "You'd let me help? After what I did?" "Everyone deserves a second chance," James said, "if they're willing to work for it." The next day, Joey showed up at the youth center. Some parents were worried. Some kids were scared. But James gave Joey simple jobs to do, away from the children at first. Fixing things, cleaning up, helping to build new shelves for the supply room. Over time, as people saw Joey working hard without causing trouble, they began to accept his presence. He was quiet, kept to himself, but did whatever was asked of him. One afternoon, James found Joey teaching a young boy how to use a hammer safely. The boy was smiling, proud of the birdhouse they were building together. "You're good with kids," James said after the boy left. Joey shrugged. "Never thought I would be. Never thought I'd get the chance." The following Sunday, James sat in his usual booth at Mel's Diner. The bell jingled, and he looked up to see Marcus and several other kids from the center come in. They spotted him and came over. "Can we join you?" Marcus asked. "Of course," James said, smiling. As the kids slid into the booth, talking excitedly about their plans for the center's upcoming talent show, James felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He had come to Riverdale looking for peace, for a quiet life after years of service. Instead, he had found a different kind of peace, not the absence of conflict, but the presence of purpose. He had found a community worth fighting for, worth building. And in helping others find their strength, he had found his own place in the world. Outside the diner window, the sun shone on the streets of Riverdale. Not a perfect town, but a better one. A town where people stood together against hate. A town where a former Marine could teach young people that true strength came not from causing fear, but from having the courage to do what was right, even when they were afraid.